The artist who accidentally exposed a lost high-tech world. There are moments in history when the past slips up, when it leaves behind something it wasn't supposed to, a clue, a scar, a record that doesn't fit the story we were taught. And sometimes that record doesn't come from a scientist or a historian. Sometimes it comes from an artist. In the mid-1700s, long before cameras, satellites, or drones, one man created images so detailed, so precise, and so unsettling that they still make scholars uncomfortable today. His name was Giovanni Battista Piranesi. Officially, he was an engraver, an architect, a dreamer with a dramatic imagination. But what if that's the safest version of the story? Because when you really look at Piranesi's work, not casually, not as decoration, but with intention, something feels wrong, very wrong. His engravings don't feel imagined, they feel recorded, like evidence. Piranesi didn't draw cozy scenes of daily life. He didn't celebrate kings or wars. He obsessed over ruins, massive, impossible ruins, structures so large they dwarf the human body to the point of humiliation. In his images, people aren't heroes, they're ants, lost, confused, wandering through stone worlds clearly not built for them. These aren't the romantic ruins we see on postcards today. These are broken vaults the size of mountains, staircases that lead nowhere, arches so tall that light seems to disappear before it reaches the ground, entire buildings partially buried beneath layers of earth, as if the ground itself rose up to swallow them. And here's the first uncomfortable question. Why would an 18th century artist imagine a world where humanity doesn't matter? Historians tell us the answer is simple. They call Piranesi's work architectural fantasy. A clever label, a safe label, one that lets everyone move on without asking dangerous questions. But fantasy usually exaggerates perfection. Piranesi didn't do that. He exaggerated destruction. Nothing in his work is whole. Everything is cracked, collapsed, sunken, or overtaken by nature. Trees grow from stone, roots tear through marble, entire structures lean as if the ground beneath them shifted suddenly and violently. This isn't imagination reaching upward, this is documentation looking backward. Piranesi was born into the family of a stonemason. He knew stone intimately. He knew weight, pressure, fracture. He understood what buildings can and cannot do, and that makes his work even harder to dismiss, because the structures he depicted shouldn't exist, not with ancient tools, not with human proportions, not with the technology we're told existed before modern times. And yet, there they are, over and over again, consistent in scale, consistent in damage, consistent in one unsettling message. Whatever built this world was not us. But the mystery doesn't stop at what he depicted. It deepens when we ask how he did it. Piranesi worked almost exclusively with copper plate etching. This wasn't sketching, this wasn't painting, this was one of the most unforgiving processes imaginable. Any mistake was permanent. Every line had to be planned in advance. Depth, perspective, shadow, all reversed like a mirror. One slip of the hand and months of work were ruined. Creating a single large etching could take weeks or months, and yet Piranesi produced over 1,500 of them. Let that number sink in. At the same time, he conducted excavations, measured ruins, wrote theoretical texts, managed a workshop, took architectural commissions, slept, ate, lived. If you break down the math, he would have needed to complete a finished engraving nearly every week for decades without pause. That isn't artistic productivity, that's industrial output. And the strangest part? After his death, his copper plates weren't scattered, sold, or lost like most artists' works. They were centralized, purchased, locked away under Vatican control in Rome. A special institute was created just to house them. Why? Why would fantasies need protection like state secrets? Then came the microscopes. When modern researchers examined Piranesi's original copper plates at extreme magnification, they expected to see the usual signs of hand engraving: irregular grooves, tiny variations, the fingerprint of a human hand. They found none. Instead, they found something shocking. Perfectly uniform microscopic dots, evenly distributed, mechanically precise. A pattern that cannot be produced by a needle, a burin, or a human hand under any known engraving technique. But it can be produced by light. This pattern is characteristic of photochemical processes, the same principle used in early photography: light-sensitive coatings, exposure, chemical development, acid etching that follows light, not muscle. Which raises a question that history textbooks desperately avoid. What if Piranesi wasn't drawing these ruins at all? What if he was capturing them? The camera obscura was already known in his time. Artists used it to project images for tracing, that's admitted. But what if someone went further? What if a light-sensitive compound was placed on copper instead of paper? What if exposure time replaced hand movement? Suddenly, everything makes sense. The flawless perspective, the overwhelming detail, the impossible productivity. Piranesi wasn't inventing scenes, he was recording them. Photography didn't begin in the 19th century, it was rediscovered then. And if that's true, then the implications are terrifying. Because photography doesn't lie, it doesn't exaggerate scale, it doesn't imagine proportions, it captures what's there. So what exactly was there in 18th century Europe? Piranesi's images show a world after disaster, not gradual decay, not slow erosion, sudden, massive destruction. Columns snapped like twigs, vaults collapsed inward, entire buildings buried to their upper floors under compacted soil. This isn't the aftermath of war or earthquakes or neglect. The pattern is global and consistent. It looks like the result of a single catastrophic event, a flood of mud, a shock wave, a planetary scale collapse. People in his engravings walk on ground levels that were once rooftops. They use ancient structures as quarries, breaking off pieces they don't understand. They live among ruins the way animals live among fossils. And then there's the scale. Doorways tens of meters tall, steps reaching a man's chest, ceilings so high that firelight would be useless, furniture larger than modern trucks, sarcophagi that look like shipping containers. These weren't ceremonial exaggerations, they were functional designs, built for beings far larger than us. Which brings us to the forbidden idea, the one that mythology whispers but modern science refuses to hear. Giants. Every culture has stories of giants, titans, gods who walked among humans, builders of impossible structures. We're told these are metaphors, allegories, fairy tales. But Piranesi's work isn't myth, it's measurement. And he's not alone. In Italy, Giulio Romano painted The Fall of the Giants. Officially, it's a mythological fresco, but it depicts something very specific. Giant humanoid beings crushed beneath collapsing architecture, lightning raining from above, total annihilation, not metaphorical, violent, final. Now cross the world to ancient India. The Mahabharata describes weapons that burn brighter than 1,000 suns, cities destroyed in an instant, poisoned water, hair falling out, survivors blinded by light, flying machines, wars between gods and giants. Different cultures, same story. A highly advanced civilization, possibly larger than modern humans, possibly global, destroyed in a cataclysmic conflict or collapse that reset the world. Piranesi didn't invent this idea, he documented the aftermath. Which explains why his work feels haunted, why humans in his images look lost, why nature is reclaiming everything, why the past feels heavier than the present. If this civilization existed, and if it was destroyed, then our history is not a story of progress, it's a story of recovery. We didn't build the world from nothing, we inherited ruins and misunderstood them. And that might be the most uncomfortable truth of all, because it means we are not the first advanced civilization on Earth, and maybe not the greatest. Piranesi wasn't trying to shock us, he wasn't writing a manifesto, he was doing something far more dangerous. He was preserving evidence. Evidence that the world we live in is built on top of something older, greater, and violently erased. And if that's true, then the question isn't whether history is wrong. The question is, what else are we standing on without realizing it? If this story made you uncomfortable, curious, or changed how you see ancient ruins, that's not an accident. That's the past knocking on the door. And the next time you see a ruin, ask yourself one simple question: who was it really built for? If you want more investigations into the hidden layers of history that textbooks don't talk about, make sure to subscribe, because once you start seeing the cracks in the official story, you can't unsee them, and history starts to look very different.